Hello everyone, Steven here, and today I would just like to walk you through the process of building just a simple expense tracker, um, building it as a model-driven application. So without further ado, I'll just dive in, and this will be a step-by-step process of exactly what you need to do in order for you to come up with this particular solution. So first of all, before you start any other project in terms of building a Power App, you need to make sure that you have got tables and relationships that you're going to undertake for that particular, that you're going to include for a particular project that you have. In so doing, you don't have to face issues in terms of, when you've started developing and then you're facing challenges and so on and so forth. It's easier that way. So the website that I like to utilize in terms of building, just coming up with a schema of how my data will be interacting with each other, it's called Draw SQL. So with the Draw SQL, you can set up a premium account. You can also just go in and then utilize it as a free account where you'll be able to share with your colleagues, friends, and so on and so forth, whatever designs that you have. So basically what I have for today's session is just a quick expense tracker, as I had mentioned earlier. So I only have three tables, and bear in mind this will be a model driven application. So the tables that I have is mainly the expense category. This will act as a parent table, because one category can actually be associated with multiple expenses. So for the expense category, just capturing the category name, description, and the category ID. For the expense table, we are capturing the date of which that particular expense was logged into the system, the total amount that was expended on that particular day, the description, maybe the reason why that expense was made, the category as well, the status, and the attachments. You were out there chasing a client, maybe you went for lunch with a client, and then you just want to capture the expenses so you can attach your receipts and so on and so forth. And one expense can have multiple line items, meaning to say, I'll give an example where you were going out to meet up with a client, and when you were going there you had to take a taxi fare over there, so that's on company expense. And over there you have to, maybe you bought the potential client some lunch, so those line items will still be logged as for that same expense. So that's why there's a relationship between the expense can have multiple line items. It will all make sense when we've developed the solution and it's all talking to each other. But first of all, here is our skeleton on exactly how everything else will function. Okay, without further ado, I'll just go back to our PowerApps window over here. So I always advise people to utilize a solution when developing applications, mainly these PowerApps applications, because it makes it easier for you to manage all the assets that are included within that application, maybe the dependencies and so on and so forth. At the same time, when you want to migrate it from the development environment into the production environment, it's easier for you just to package it as a package your solution where all the contents will be there, all the required necessary contents will be in there, and it's easier just to migrate from point A to point B, as compared to making sure that you're now bringing in one item at a time. So it makes it easier for you. And to create a solution is pretty straightforward. What you do is, on the left hand side here, you just go to solutions, and under solutions you just click on new solutions at the top. I'll give this as just expense tracker. Okay, the publisher, I'll just utilize the default publisher, and then everything else is okay. I'll just click create. So now I have my solution, which is my container where all those tables and the application that we're going to build on top of that, all of those will be housed in this solution called expense tracker. So now we have got, we don't have anything because this is just a freshly deployed solution. So in order for us to add that first table, which is, I did indicate that the parent table was the expense category table. In order for you to add the table, what I'll do, so first of all, before we create the table, I just wanted to emphasize on the reason why I'm building I'm creating database tables is because you can only create a model-driven PowerApp application on top of data that is sitting in database. So if you have got an SQL database, okay, if you have got an SQL database and you want to create a model-driven PowerApp from that SQL database, you can visualize that SQL database, but that functionality is only available to SQL databases and SharePoint sites on list and so on and so forth. But the way of which you can actually create a model-driven application is by having that data in a model-driven in a database table. That hence the reason why I'm creating database tables here. Okay. So to create our category table, what I'll do is that I'll just click on this drop down that says new, and then I'll go to table, and then I'll just click new table. I'll give it the name of expense category. Okay, let me just fix that. All right, and on the primary column, I'll give it a name called category name. Category name. I'll go back to my properties. If there are addition configurations that you want to add, what you can do is you can just go to click on advanced options, and then from here you can add who owns it. You can even add an image related to that particular table. You can even set up if you want to be tracking audits, like who did what, tracking all the changes in the within the table. So database makes it easier for you to customize the security aspect of it. You don't want anyone to have access to this table. You can set it up all in here. So and it's self-explanatory. You can just go in here, dive in, and then see exactly how everything is functioning. But for now, I just need to have that. And because I'm not keeping any attachments in terms of this particular table, I won't check this. But if you want to be keeping attachments for your category expense category table, you can check here, and then that will be activated, and you'll be able to add to attach to store attachments as notes or files, so that you can actually just click here. For now, I'll just click on save. So after I've clicked on save, I need to create the other columns that I did showcase earlier when I was going through the entity relational diagram. So in order for me to add that column, I'll go to the columns tab under schema. I'll just click on that columns, and you see that there are multiple columns, and a lot of the columns which we haven't created, because database is intelligent enough to create additional columns which are system generated, that will track who did what, who's the owner of the record, who created it, when was it created, when was it modified, who modified. So it makes it easier for you. If you were to build this from the ground up, it will be another issue on its own, but database makes it simple and straightforward for you to actually deploy your applications. But the column that I want to add is the description. I just want to have the category name, but at the same time also need to have a description, just a brief description. So in order for me to add that, I'll go to columns, click on new column, add in my description, and this, it should be just a single line will do. And it should also be a mandatory field. So in order for you to configure, if you don't want it to be a mandatory field, you can just put it as optional, but I want to add it as a mandatory field. So I'll save this. Okay, so now we have got our columns. Our columns are created, but how would the user now be able to add that information for it through the columns that we've created? So the only way the user can actually do that is by opening a form and then entering that detail, the category name and the category description. So in order for us to update the form, what we'll do now is we'll move from the columns. Now we'll go to the forms. Okay, for the forms, you see that we have got information, but these much as these are system generated forms, you see that there are different form types. So the main form is the form that you will be utilized by the model-driven application to enter new records or to update records that are already sitting in the database. Okay, so that's the main form. The quick view is a form that you set up if you want to be showing columns or snippets of what you have in the parent table, if you want to show it in a related table. So we'll handle that when we're covering the lookups and whatnot. But for now, I just want to update this main form here. So I'll just click on the information, and then it will give me a canvas of how exactly the end user will be seeing the form. How will it be, how the end user will be interfacing with the form. Okay, so we have got our category name already here. What I'll do now is that I have to add my other column. So seeing that, let's say, seeing that because the here, which is just a mishmash of system generated columns and my default columns. If I just want to see only my custom columns, what I'll do is that here on search, I'll click on this drop down and then click on custom. So all the custom fields, custom columns will be here. So I'll just drag this and drop it here. For the owner, I don't necessarily need my end user to be seeing who the owner is, because it's not necessarily fundamental to the functionality of the system. So what I'll do is I'll select the column, and I cannot delete it because it's a mandatory field. In order for you to know if it's a mandatory field, it has got this asterisk in front of it, so which means that we can just remove it here from our form. So what we can do is that I will just select it, and then I'll come to the far right over here, and then from here I'll just click hide. So it will hide the column, so the end user will just be able to just enter, will just be able to see these two columns that we've defined here. Okay, so for now I'll save and publish. I'll save and publish the form. Now I also need to have a way of showing all the categories that we have in the system. So in order for me to do that, I'll have to edit the view for this form. In order for me to do that, I'll go back to forms here, and then I'll click on the drop down close to forms, and then I'll click on views, and then I'll edit the main active view, so which is the public view here. I'll just click on it to open it, and then from here I'll have the category name, and I'll just also drag my description to here. I can remove this created on. I can also sort that I want this to be in a descending order from A to Z, so that can also be added there. The description, let me just increase the width, the size like so. So that's my view. My view is done. So basically we've created one table, which is the categories table. I'll go back. So now we have to create the expense table now. Okay, the expense table is a child table in relation to the expense category table. So for us to do that, I'll just go to tables, and then I'll go click new, same way we've done for the expense category. So here I'll just say expense. The expense, I can just say expense description as the primary column. Okay, expense description. And because we want to be keeping attachments in terms of the receipts, you were in a cafe, you were out there for lunch with a client, and then there was a receipt, you can keep it here. So I think for this one we need to enable the attachments. I don't necessarily need to tamper with anything else. So for now, I have got my table name and my primary column, which is just the description of the expense. Right here we are good. I'll save this. So now we've created two tables, but we haven't created columns in terms of the expense table over here. I'll go to columns, same way I've done with the previous table, and from here I'll click on new column, and then from here I'll specify that, okay, the date, I don't necessarily need to create the date because the system database will already store the date at which this particular item was created on. But this will entail that the moment you've done something, then you have to record it at that particular moment in time, which is not necessarily the case all the time. There's some other instances where you did the expenses, but you were preoccupied with something else. So if you were to leave it to the system generated field, it'll get you in trouble in terms of the inconsistency of the data. Maybe I did something today, it was in the evening, I was exhausted, I forgot to log in to log my expense. Then I'm doing it tomorrow, so it will record as if that expense was expended tomorrow in terms in when the actual expense was actually done today. So I think the date field will be a necessary field for us to add here, so that you can specify that okay, it was at this date and it was at this particular time. Okay, so I'll click on new, and then I'll just say date, and this the data type for this one should be a date and time, because you need to specify the date, and you also need to specify the time at which you actually made that expense. From here, I'll add it as a business required field. I'll save this. We also need to add a category field. So the category, we're not just adding a text field. Categories, we're getting those categories from this expense category table. And the way we can actually get that information is by adding a relationship between these two tables. So there are multiple ways of doing this. The first way of doing it is you can just go in here, click on new column, and you can say category. Okay, and then on data type you can specify that this is a lookup. Okay, and then you can say okay, this lookup is looking up to the expense category. If you do this, automatically the database will create a one-to-many relationship between these two tables. Okay, but the other alternative, I'll just cancel this. The other alternative of creating a relationship between tables is to just go to here. I'll go to relationships, and then from here I can say I want to create a new relationship. What's the relationship type? So same relationships we have in any other SQL, in any other databases, so you can add it here. So the relationship, because I'm in the child table, which means that the relationship will be a many to one, because we're referencing to a parent table, which is the category. So I'll select the first one, which is the minute one. Okay, I'll select that. Okay, this is the category table. This is the category table. It's expense category, and then it will ask me that okay, this is a one-to-many relationship, but what do you want to call the to display the column as? So you can specify the display name here, but for now I just want, expense category is okay, but I want this expense category field to be a mandatory field. So I'll select here and business required. So you see what I've showcased two ways of which you can do it. You can just go in there, click add a column, and the column you can specify it as a lookup field. But you can also just go to relationships, and then you can also add it from there. So I've shown you all the alternatives on which you can add a relationship or lookup columns. Okay. For now, let's go back to our columns, and we've added the category, we've added the date. We haven't added the total amount. I'll get to that, because the total amount now, it will be getting all the values that are sitting. Let me just go back to this drawing. The total amount is the total sum of all the expense line items that are sitting in here. So which means that we will need to create a row up field inside this expense table. We can only create the row up field if and only if this table is available over here, and we have got that relationship as well. So that is why for now I will not enter this amount over here. All right, so for this one I think we can utilize those few columns for now. Let's configure our table, our form. So I'll go to forms. I'll edit the information form. I'll filter out just to show the items that I have, right? I'll specify the date, the description of the expense category, okay? The total amount, we'll add it later. The owner field, I'll just hide it for now. But we also had attachments, okay? An attachments field. So remember, as you recall, that we did check the field where the section when we're creating the expense table, we did check the enable attachments for this table. So the way database stores those attachments is by notes, okay? So the notes can be accessed from a timeline. So what I want to do now is to have my form, because I only have three fields. I want to split this window over here into two parts. How to do that is I'll just select this entire thing, here, this general tab, and if I come to the right hand side here, you see that under layout I've got one column. I'll just say I want it to be two columns. So I have got my form with my three items over here, but I also have a new section over here. I'll select this new section, and then I'll go to the top here where it says components. Come on, load up. I'll go to components because now I need to add the timeline. Okay, so what the timeline does is that it will show you all the notes and all the attachments that you have in relation to that particular table. So I'll just add that the timeline over here, and I don't need to be showing the new section at the top there, so I'll just hide the label for this section, okay, by just selecting it and then clicking hide label here. At the same time, you can also add a field, a dedicated field as an attachment. The way you can do that is you can just come in here and then you select add new column at the top here. Okay, and the column, under column types, we have got a column type of attachments. So you can add attachments where someone can add whatever file. Maybe it's an Excel sheet, it's an image they've captured, it's whatever file type, they can attach it from there. If you specify it as an image, it will only be able to capture only images. So take note of that. Okay, so for now we've added our timeline here. By just leaving it blank, users can be confused. So what we can do is let's just give it a name of attachments, okay, and unhide the label. Save and publish. We'll come back to this form when we've created the expense line items, in order for us to be able to add the in order for us to be able to add the necessary grand total, because the grand total will be a row up field that will be accessing its data from that child table. Okay, we just wait for it to save and publish, and then we'll go back to just finalize on the final table, which is the expense line items. Wonderful. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back here, and we've customized the form. Let's just quickly customize the view as well, the view for this table. So we have got the expense description, the date of the transaction, and we can also specify the expense category here. And let's remove the created on, and let's sort this out by showing the newest expense and to order expense. We'll come back to this form and the expense form and the expense view when we've added the other columns as well. So let's go back to the tables, And let's create our final table, which is the expense line item. Okay, so expense line item. The primary key for this one, it should be just description as well. I'm way too lazy when it comes to naming columns, so I think description will do for now. Okay. For this one, yes, I can add attachments, or let's not add attachments, so that I demonstrate how you can add a column. The column which would be a column which will have a data type of file or images. There's an element here of which I'll utilize for this particular form. This is the leveraging of quick create forms. For the forms, we have got I did show you that we have the main form, and we have got the quick view form, and then we have got quick create form. This quick create form is whenever you're navigating through a model-driven application. If you're just using the main form, what you'll do is that each and every time you'll be navigated to that particular form that you want to update. But if you want to streamline the process to ease up the amounts of clicks a user is making for that particular in that particular application, you can just add a form as a pop-up whilst they're still on the parent window. It can just come in as a pop-up. So in order for that pop-up to actually pop up, you have to utilize this quick create. It will all make sense when we've done everything, and then we've created the application. It will all make sense. For now, take note of this, that I've activated it, and how it functions. It will all be clear when we've gone to the actual developing of the application. Okay, so I've got my description here. I haven't added an attachment because we'll create it as a field. So I've also activated the leveraged the quick create form, and then I'll save. Okay, for the line items, I'll need to add a date as well, and this date should be date and time. It should be required. Save. I also need to add an amount. So this is a small table. I just need to add an amount. The amount should be a currency field. Okay, and this one should also be a mandatory field. I've created those two items. Okay, those two columns. You can always add more columns, and if depending on the scenario that you have. But for me, for the demonstration, I'll just create those two items, and then I'll now edit my main form. Okay, I'll edit my main form to add those two columns that I've just created here. So I'll just hide all the other standard columns just to remain with the columns that I've added. So I'll add my date over there, and then I'll also add the total amount. The owner, as we've also done with other tables, I want, the end user, shouldn't be able to see that. And one other thing is the attachment. So if there are any attachments in terms to this line item, we can just create a new column, the data type of file, and this one is the data type of file. Okay, so the end user, when they click on that particular field, if they are using their phone, it can prompt them out to select whatever maybe files that are sitting on their machine, or maybe it can also prompt them out to utilize the camera. So it will all depend on the end user. So I'll drag it, the attachment file, and then add it there. Okay, from here we're done. I'll save this. Okay, let's go back to the previous window, and then from here let's also just quickly edit the expense line items, the view rather. So for the view, I want to show the date, and I also want to show the total amount, and I can also just show the created on, and it should show newer items going downwards. Okay, but I did check on the quick create form. Okay, so we have to also create that. But if we go to forms, we're only having 3 out of the box forms, which is the quick view, main form, and the card. So now, because we've checked that particular leveraging of quick create forms, I can, if I go to here new form, you see that now I've got an additional quick create form. So this by default is not there until you check that particular option. So that's why I had to, you know, delve deeper into that particular field on how, what exactly it's doing. I'll hide all the other columns. Here I just want to show the description, the date, and the total amount. But I don't want to have this new section part showing. I'll hide that label, and for here I'll hide the section entirely. You cannot delete these sections, so all you can do is just select them and hide them if you're not utilizing them. Okay. So for now we've created our table. Okay, we've created our table, but now we also need to create a lookup column in this table. The lookup column, it is the one that will be showing that, okay, I am a child and I'm depending on my parent, which is the expense. Okay, so if I go to the columns and click on new column, and this one should be expense. Okay, and this one should be a lookup column, and it should look up to expense. Okay, should look up to expense. So now what we're doing now is we automatically, by just creating a lookup column, it has associated a relationship. So I've utilized both methods of building a relationship between two different tables. First of all, by going directly to the relationships, and then creating it from here. But as well, you can also just create it from here. Now for the expense line item, we're done. That's it. But we had not yet finished setting up the expense table, because the expense table was waiting, or is relying on these line items in order for it to have its grand total. So what I'll do now is that I'll go to expense. Let me just go to forms, open up my main form. Okay, open up my main form, and then from here I'll create a new column. And remember in the expense line items table, I've created the amount field as a currency field. So here I'll say, okay, this is a grand total field, and the grand total field should also be a currency field. If the two columns are of different data types, the calculations won't be able to happen. So if I've indicated there as a whole number, and here I'm adding it as a currency, you won't be able to sum up the items, the amounts in the line items. So from here, you see that here the behavior is simple. If it's simple, which means that I'll have to manually type in the totals. But I don't want it to be simple. I want it to be a complex field. So what I'll do is that I'll click on that one, and then I'll say roll up. When you're rolling up, what you're saying is, I am a parent table and I want to sum up all the line items that are related to me as a column. So that is done. That's okay. I'll save and edit for this particular column. It will navigate me to another window, and from that window it is where I'll now be able to configure the roll up. So this is the window that I have over here. Let me just wait for it to load. Okay, so now the source entity is the expense entity. Entity is just a fancy, the old way of which Dataverse used to name its tables, but now it's been updated to table. But there's some other instances where you see entity. So when I mention entity table, it's just one and the same. So here I'll specify that it is related to the expense line item. So I'll just check that. And then for filters, if I need to add any filters, I can add there. But here I just want it to aggregate. So here you can add the aggregate function. You can say, okay, I just want to see minimum average, but here we want to sum up all the total amount for this particular item. So you see how easy it is. I'll save and close. When I save and close, that is done in terms of our grand total field. And I can just bring it over here, the grand total field. And the way it works, it has to be manually triggered. The system is, automatically refreshes it like 3 to 6 times a day, but manually you can also just click on the calculator here, and then you'll be able to calculate the grand totals. Okay, so now we've created our parent here, but I think it will be easier for whoever is using the application to see the line items that are associated with this particular expense, so that they're able to tell, okay, this grand total that we're having here came from these items, instead of them navigating to an entire different screen. So what I'll do here is I'll select this general tab, and you see here the column widths are just 50-50. Let's give column A 70 and the attachments just 30. Okay, and then what I'll do now is that I'll go to components, and then I'll select a column section. I'll just bring it at the bottom here. Now I want us to add those line items. You should be able to just see them here, and the way we can add them is by adding them as a subgrid. So I'll just click on subgrid and bring it here. So what subgrid does is that it will show you items. So here I can specify that I want to only see related items that are related to this column. So the items that are related to this column, one of them is the expense line item. The moment I select that, save. Okay, the section, let me just hide that label. I'll select this, and then I'll just give it a name of expense line items. Okay, so as I'd mentioned earlier, that when you're creating a line item, you don't have to be navigated to another window. That is why we created that quick create form, so that when I just click on this, I want to add a new expense line item, it will just be a dialog box that will come up here. It will all make sense when we've created the application. So I'll save this. So now I can see that, okay, my description is I was having a lunch date. The date was this. The expense category is this. The grand total can only be calculated when you've added these line items. Now, if you're saying that, okay, the grand total is $90, and that $90 is coming from these line items. So that's how the setup here is. Let me just quickly update the view for the expense, because the view we had not yet created the grand total. So I'll just go back to our previous window here, and I'll go to views, active expenses, and then from here I'll just add the grand total at the very end, like that. Okay, simple. We're showing the description, the expense category, the date, and the grand total. Save and publish. Let me just override the changes. Okay, so that is done. All the tables, all the relationships, how to set them up, how to add the columns, that's how easy it is. But we've just created the tables. How can we create now the model-driven application? Okay, straightforward. I'll go to apps. I'll just click on new here at the top. Again, when I select app, you see that I've got Canvas application model-driven app page. So for now, we want to create a model-driven application. I'll click on the model-driven application. I'll just give it a name, expense tracker. You can add a description. You can, add all this information. I just want to give it a name. Okay. So now this is the modern view of creating a model-driven application. The previous way of doing it was a bit similar, but it was the interface was you needed to create the sitemap and everything else, but here they've simplified it. So this update is actually pretty straightforward, so you won't have any challenges when creating applications. So what is it saying when you're saying add a page? To add a page is straightforward. It's just you know, what do you want the users to be doing in the application? So what we need to do is to add a database table. The database table that we want is, first of all, the expense category, the expense category, the expense line items. The good thing is that all of them had the initial expense, so it's easy for me to just select them all at once. Okay, so I've selected them here, but you see here it's saying new group. I don't like that name, so in order for me to update it, I can just go in here, click on it, and then to the right hand side here I can just say expense track expense. Okay, all right, that is it. What has happened here is that you have created a model driven application. You don't believe me? Let's test it out. First of all, let's save this. Okay, let's save this, publish it, and play the application. Okay, so you see, by just playing the application, we have got a fully working application, a model driven application. This is the reason why I love using PowerApps, because from the initiation to the development and to actual execution, it has just taken us a few minutes over here. Let's test it out. Let's add some categories. The category that I'll add, I'll click new. The category, I'll give it client onboarding. Okay, let's just save and close. Okay, now let's add an expense for this particular category. I'll go to expense, new. I'll say meeting with Steven. Okay, potential client. The date was today. The time we met for brunch, I think that was 11 o'clock. The expense category, you see that it's the expense category that we've just added together here. I'll select it. For the grand total, we don't have anything to add here because the grand total is relying on the line items. Okay, so I'll save this for now. The moment I save it, you see that now the expense line items has popped up at the bottom here. From here, I'll just click on this new expense item. So you see that it hasn't navigated us back to another screen. It has just given us a pop-up that we have here. So for here, I'll say taxi. The date was today, and I had started off. We were meeting at 11. I had started off at 10. The amount was 122. Okay. You can choose to save and close if it was just one line item, but you can also click on this drop down to save. So you save this record, and then it will give you a fresh form. So I'll save that the taxi transaction. You see that it has been saved here. I'll also say lunch with Steve. I'll select the date. I think we've added more dates, but you can always optimize your application. The lunch costed us £300, and that's all we spent. Okay, so we have got these two line items here, but the total here is still saying 0. As I said, the Lookup field is a system, can be calculated by the system in the background, but at the same time you can also initiate it on your own. So you can just click on this calculator, recalculate. What will happen is that it will go into this amount field and then sum up everything. There we go. that's how we can build a simple and straightforward model-driven application that will help us track our expenses in terms of, you know, you can just set it up and then you can manage all your expenses. I mean, what I've given you here is just the foundation and not everything. So in terms of what you can do with it, you can always add whatever items that you have on top. But if I'm to select Steven, and this record over here, I've got the description, I've got the date, and I've got the line items that are giving me this grand total. It has been Steven, and thank you for watching.